Today, our focus is on what Camus said was philosophy's most important question. He said, the meaning of life is the most urgent of questions and the fundamental question of philosophy. That is, judging whether life is or is not worth living. Spoiler alert, he thought it was worth living. There are many pressing questions for us to ask regarding the meaning of life for existentialists. For example, if there's no universal, pre-prescribed, or predetermined clear meaning of life, is life still worth living? Now, in the myth of Sisyphus, Camus is referencing Greek mythology. In Greek mythology, Sisyphus was condemned by the gods to the pointless task of rolling a large rock up a mountain only to watch that rock roll right back down and have to repeat that task for all of eternity. As a life filled entirely of mundane and trivial labor, Sisyphus's existence is meant to illustrate the futility and absurdity we confront in our own lives. Camus observes that a person's life can become essentially a mundane routine. Rising, streetcar, 4 hours in the office, meals, streetcar, 4 hours of work, meal, sleep, essentially work, home, Netflix, sleep, repeat. According to the same rhythm, Monday through Sunday. Yet for Camus, Sisyphus is not to be pitied. Sisyphus represents the absurd hero because he chooses to live in the face of absurdity and can be happy. So, what's the absurd? Absurdity is a contradiction or divorce between two things. He says human life is absurd because of the distance between what man wants and what the world actually offers him. The absurd comes with the realization that the world isn't rational. At this point, he says of his effort, man stands face to face with the irrational. He feels within him his longing for happiness and reason. The absurd is born of this confrontation between the human need, that is, for happiness and reason, and the unreasonable silence of the world, that is, the lack of a clear answer we get back. He says we can't escape the absurd, and we have to come to terms with this. The myth of Sisyphus is primarily a critique of existentialism, specifically to the attempts of thinkers like Kierkegaard to overcome the absurd by appealing to God or the transcendent, something beyond this life or realm. These thinkers, Camus claims, contradict themselves by presupposing that life is absurd in some way, but proposing a solution to the absurd, so that life isn't really absurd after all. For example, Kierkegaard sees life as profoundly absurd due to its central lack of meaning that's just clear. He thereby proposes that we take what he calls a leap of faith, essentially arguing that belief in God will ultimately provide one's life with meaning. Camus opposes this form of what he calls escapism, claiming that existentialists, quote, deify what crushes them and find reason to hope in what impoverishes them. Camus rejects appeals to the transcendent or to God. For him, the absurd, the divorce between us and the world, our needs and what the world offers, represents this inescapable human condition. As we'll see, in place of the false hope of religiosity that Camus perceives, Camus advises a vivid awareness of the absurd as a form of revolt. What do absurdity and happiness have to do with one another, and how can they coexist? Well, having diagnosed the essential human problem, the human condition, Camus shifts his interest to the prognosis, determining whether and how to live in the face of the absurd. Even Sisyphus, he says, can be happy because the struggle itself towards the heights, the struggle itself back up that hill, is enough to fill a man's heart. He says the lucid, clear recognition of the absurdity of existence liberates us from the belief in another life and permits us to live for the instant, for the beauty, pleasure, and the implacable grandeur of existence, as he calls it. Lucidity is the clarity and the courage of mind which refuses all comforting illusions and self-deception. Sisyphus' willingness to see things for what they are. He says the absurd man says yes. He says yes to a situation, and his efforts will henceforth be unceasing. That is, he will continue living this life. He will say yes. He likes to imagine Sisyphus at that moment when he's finished pushing that rock up its hill, and then he has to watch it roll back down again. All of his efforts erased, a new job to be completed yet again. He said, "It's during that return, that pause, that Sisyphus interests me." He says, "I see that man going back down with a heavy yet measured step towards the torment of which he will never know the end." Measured step. He's embracing this. Later, he says, "At each of these moments, when he leaves the heights, the top of the hill, and gradually sinks towards the lairs of the gods, he is superior to his fate. He's embracing it," he says. "He's stronger than his rock."